Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're really pleased to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining. First, to introduce myself, my name is Ruth Wright. I am the head of lifestyle verticals here at Euronews. And in today's role, I'm here as the head of Euronews Green. The beady-eyed amongst you, if you've joined us for previous debates or you follow our content, you might have noticed we recently rebranded. We were previously called Living, and now we're called Green. Green perfectly sums up what we do. We report on the environment and sustainability, all in the name of creating a greener world for us all to live in. Welcome to my panelists today. In true Euronews style, it's a very international mix. We have Maria joining from Madrid, Henri is in Brussels, and Wellington is all the way over in Mato Grosso in Brazil. I'm lucky to have such an esteemed panel with me. They all work to ensure our favorite food and drinks will be available far into the future. And they work across food production, food promotion, and policy as well. If you want to follow Euronews Green right now, you can do so. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and of course on our website and on the Euronews app. A quick note before we go on. Please be assured that we are all socially distancing or working in home offices, hence why we are not wearing masks. Just to tell you a little bit more about Green, we cover news daily, as well as features and commission pieces from the best minds in the environmental space. Now, the reason we're all here, today's debate. You're going to hear about lots of inspiring projects and work. So having done a few of these, I really recommend you have a notebook or a Word document handy, and perhaps for this one, a snack, as I'm sure this discussion is going to make you quite hungry. And of course, we want this to be really interactive. So please don't forget to leave us your questions and ideas in the comments box, and I'll come to your questions throughout the debate. So enough from me to kick things off. Please, could you all introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do? Maria, why don't you go first?
Very pleased to participate in this very exciting debate. Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, my name is Maria Ranjo. I am a civil servant. I work in ETHEX, which is the agency in charge of promoting the internationalization of small and medium enterprises all over the world. And precisely, I'm in charge of the agri-food sector. So this is my job, a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Wellington, could you go next?
Oh, thanks for Euronews invitation. I'm Wellington Andrade. I'm CEO at AproSoja, Mato Grosso Soybean and Corn Association. Mato Grosso is producing now 1/3 of the soybean in the whole Brazilian country. And we're used to represent more than 7.5 thousand members here in Mato Grosso, among soybean and corn producers.
Thank you so much. And last not least, Henri.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. A very good afternoon to you and, of course, to the audience. My name is Henri Delange, and I work in the unit dealing with organic farming and, by extension, organic production in the European Commission's Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development, which is the Director General dealing with what is called the Common Agricultural Policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So pleased to have you all with us today. All of today's panelists have been working with our commercial team at Euronews. It's a really important part of our work, working with brands, companies, organizations on partner content. So if you work somewhere and you have eco news or sustainability successes that you'd like to share, then please do get in touch with me or my colleagues at any time, and we'll be happy to discuss. So to kick things off, sustainability can mean many different things in many different sectors. We report on it from many different angles at Green. But I'd love to hear what does sustainability mean to you, and specifically what makes a food or drink sustainable? Henri, could you go first?
Yes, thank you for this question. I think from where I'm sitting in the organics unit in DG Agri in the European Commission, I think a reference point for us is, of course, the legislation on organics. And we have a new law entering into application on the 1st of January next year. And that contains a nice definition of what is organic farming, what is organic production. And it mentions the following elements. So it's an overall system of farm management of food production that combines the best practices in environment and in climate action, that preserves a high level of biodiversity, preserves natural resources, and also applies high animal welfare standards. So I think from where I'm sitting, this is a useful definition of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a really comprehensive definition. Maria, would you agree with that? Is there any parts of that that you see differently from the work you do?
Well, yes, of course. I cannot disagree with what the point of view from the European Commission. Of course, the thing is that the concepts that the European Commission has as a reference is not valid throughout the world. Organic, for instance, in the US has a completely different meaning, or in China or whatever. To me, what is really important are the objectives of the United Nations, the 17 objectives that the United Nations has fixed. And those are really the target to be reached by companies. That means economic sustainability, social sustainability, and so on. For instance, Spain is the first organic producer in terms of area cultivated within the European Union, and the first organic producer in the world. Just because we have a wonderful weather that helps very much producing organic products in a sustainable way. That means that we don't have to use energy very polluting energies like in other countries, for instance. So organic is not the same as sustainable. And I think the term that is really important for the world and for consumers is precisely sustainability. That's a term that I really like to use when promoting and helping companies to become sustainable in the long term, and also consumers to have also this term in their minds.
Thank you. I love that point that you're blessed with great weather in Spain, which makes things easier in many ways than it might be in other countries. But as we'll get on to later, there's no guarantee that any of our weather systems are going to stay the same. In fact, they're all changing at frankly terrifyingly fast rates. So let's get on to that later.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Ruth, because we are also, especially, the climate change is going to hit Spain very badly. So that's a very important point to bear in mind when tackling sustainability. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Wellington, what does sustainability mean to you at AproSoja?
Well, starting from environmental, economic, and social tripod sustainability, from the environmental perspective, we have here the legal reservation. Legal reservation, for instance, is mandatory by the Forest Code, and where we have to preserve 80% of the land with native vegetation in the Amazon biome, and 35% in the Cerrado biome. And of this total native vegetation in the Brazilian country, and 26% is inside the agricultural farms. And we have also here, especially in Mato Grosso, the water preservation, the water spring preservation, for instance, and the water spring in the farms here in Mato Grosso is preserved and around 95%. And also we have the no-till planning. No-till planning allows us to don't plow the soil, for instance, and so we prevent the erosion, we increase water and nutrient absorption. So we have a good quality of soil, for instance, increasing organic matter, cycling nutrients, and all those things from the environmental perspective. From the economic perspective, agribusiness in Brazil has 26% of the total GDP participation, and the soybean complex has 40% of this agribusiness GDP participation. So we have a very important role here in the total Brazilian GDP. And of course, from the social perspective, we increase the human development index, and we increase job creation and all those things here that the soybean complex has improving here in Mato Grosso and also in Brazil.
Thank you so much. I love that we're already getting to a place where we're considering sustainability from a number of different points of view. You know, we've got the economic, we've got the social, we've got climate change and the environment. And this is definitely something we report on regularly. You know, we're all humans who have to live on this earth. And so just looking after the soil health doesn't work if we don't also look after the people who are working the soil. So that's quite a nice link to my next question to you all was, what do you see as the biggest threats to our food supplies in the near future, or it could be in the long-term future? You know, what are the things that you're looking ahead to that your work is mitigating against? Henri, could you take that one first?
Yeah, so I think, again, talking from the perspective of organic farming, there is, of course, this overall context of sustainability, the sustainability agenda, and this agenda is precisely about the threats which you mentioned. So we have the overall strategy of the European Green Deal, which aims for climate neutrality by 2050. And then within that context, two very important strategies have been adopted, and they point immediately to the threats. We have the farm to fork strategy, which is all about fair and healthy and sustainable diets. And then we have the biodiversity strategy, which is about really bringing nature back into our lives. Now, what is interesting is that both of these strategies recognize, again, the important role of organic farming and organic production, because it has these direct effects on environment and climate and animal welfare and biodiversity, but also because it helps to achieve all these other targets in those two strategies. Reducing the use of fertilizers, reducing the use of pesticides, reducing the use of antimicrobials. So these two strategies are really about the long-term sustainability of our food systems, of our food production systems, of our agricultural systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, could you tell us a bit about what threats or risks do you focus on in your work?
Yes, thank you very much, Ruth. Well, I love to say that food is the new internet. That's not my words. It's Kimball Musk, the brother of Elon Musk, words. And I say that because from my perspective, the problem is the transit between the short term and the long term. And of course, you know, Spain is a food nation, but it is extremely important to invest in this transition to the long term. I don't think necessarily organic is always means or equals to sustainable, as I was saying before. So I think it's very important for companies to become innovative. I see many examples of companies precisely in the very traditional sectors, like milk sectors, that are now producing milk cubators. They are producing milk in different ways. Or, for instance, in the meat sector, they are starting to produce alternative protein. I think it's very important for consumers to realize that if they want to preserve the diversity and excellence of our pantry, it is also very important to have this transition from short-term to long-term, investing in innovation. And from my perspective, this is very important to realize, both for producers but also for consumers.
Thank you. So, Wellington, as CEO of a producer, how are you using innovation to ensure that you can continue growing soya and corn?
Well, we have a great machinery park here in Mato Grosso, so we have a big scale to plant and to harvest the soybean and corn production. But we have maybe a big threat right now in this moment, that is climate, that is drought here, especially here in Brazil in the south, but now here in the middle of the state, because this crop, for instance, the soybean, the corn crop, we have a lot of problem with drought this season in the crop, in this corn crop. And of course, one of the biggest challenge for us is to adapt our production to the Green Deal, to the EU Green Deal, and to the farm to fork strategy, especially on organic matter, because organic production is important, but it's very difficult to deploy this here in the big scale in Brazil, because here, like I said before, we have the no-till planting, and to produce organic in a big scale, we have to plow the soil. So we're gonna have some erosion, some less lack of water absorption in soil, and it's very expensive to produce organic here in Mato Grosso and even in Brazil. But it's a challenge because we have to adapt our production to the customer's wish, for instance.
Yes, yeah, customers are a huge part of this, and I'll come on to that for sure. Henri, so Wellington has just made a really good point there, which is that every producer in the world may want to go organic, but there's lots of barriers to doing so, financially being one of them, especially for large-scale producers. How is that taken into account in the Organic Action Plan? How are the Commission helping producers with that?
Yes, so thank you for this question. So indeed, we have this action plan in support of organic farming. And this action plan, because we hear a lot about policymakers have to acknowledge the complexity of things, and policymakers have to take holistic approaches. So that is what this action plan, in support of this target of 25% of EU agricultural land under organic farming by 2030, tries to do. So this plan really has three axes. It is a demand-led plan. So it is really focusing, first of all, on increasing the demand for organic products, because the underpinning rationale is really that unless an organic farmer sees increased demand for organic products, unless, of course, organic food processors, or unless food processors see increasing demand for the products, they will not convert to organic production. So it is a demand-led approach, but nevertheless, we also tackle the supply side, and because that's what Maria has already referred to several times, organics is, of course, a model for sustainability, but of course, there are weaknesses there which have to be addressed, among other things, through research and innovation. And so, indeed, there are barriers in terms of demand. There are barriers in terms of the supply, which doesn't necessarily follow the demand, where there are bottlenecks. And then there is indeed this great need for research and innovation to address yields and seed varieties and alternative plant protection products. So I think the barriers are multiple, and that is why we need this holistic, complex approach, which is precisely what this action plan tries to take. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, is there anything in that you'd like to respond to?
Well, as I was saying, of course, we are very much committed with organic production, and Spain is a power engine in as regards organics. But I don't think this as the main target and the main message to pass to consumers and to pass to producers. Organic, it's of course excellent if you can do it in a sustainable way. But in the very bottom of the chain production of food, there are many other objectives that should be tackled, like among the 17 objectives that the United Nations have fixed, organic is just one of them. And even the concept of organic is not a worldwide concept. So for me, from the Spanish Agency of Promoting Internationalization, is very much the point is to see whether we are really having a commitment to have a food, agri-food sector really sustainable in the long term, because we have to think about the next generations and really providing and being really able to produce excellent food and diverse food in a sustainable way. So this is a slightly different point of view. For me, sustainability is a much stronger objective than organic. There's a very deep debate whether really, for instance, a carrot produced in the Netherlands with tons of energy, is this really sustainable? Of course, it could be organic, but for me, it's not better than a carrot produced in a regular way, but having sustainable ways of producing this carrot. So this is why, for me, the long-term view is much more important than the short-term perspective of having lots of production being produced or being having the seal of organic production.
It feels like there's lots of different angles we can approach these issues from. And hopefully, as you say, Henri, a holistic approach where everyone is trying. That's something we very often say to our readers. You know, one of the most common questions we get from our readers is, I want to live a greener life. I want to reduce my carbon footprint, but I really don't know where to start. You know, should I stop flying or should I quit meat? You know, stop eating all meat. And I think people, and in your case, probably you see them as consumers, can often feel really overwhelmed by all the things we hear we should do to cut our carbon footprint. But at the end of the day, I think it's often that everyone will have a slightly different approach. But as long as everyone is working towards the same goal, then hopefully in the end we get there and we reach things like carbon neutrality, as is in the Green Deal. Wellington, I'd love to hear from you, the growers that you work with. What's their response to all of this? You know, how do you bring them on board with your sustainability practices?
Well, we have a program here in Mato Grosso called Soja Plus. It is a program that we guide our growers in order to comply the forest code and the environmental legislation and labor legislation. So we provide to the growers some course about the legislation, environment and social and labor legislation, in order to bring to them all those legislation knowledge that can help them in the field to comply the law, for instance, to comply the forest code and to comply the legal reservation and to maintain the native vegetation inside the farmers, and also to comply the labor law here in Brazil and to comply the social law here in Brazil. So it is a program that we have deployed 10, 11 years ago, and we have now more than 1/3 of the growers inside this program. It's not mandatory by the association, but we used to guide and to bring to the growers those kind of guidance in order to comply in the law here, even in environmental, even in labor and even in social legislation here in Brazil.
Thank you. So another holistic approach.
Yes.
I have a question here from a viewer, which is specifically for you, Henri. Iona asked, is the new CAP foreseeing biodiversity protection as a clear measure besides the agroclimate measures that you discussed?
Well, the negotiations on the next CAP are, of course, still ongoing. So there is no full legal certainty about what kinds of support the next CAP will provide or not provide. But what we do know is that there are, in the first pillar of the Common Agricultural Policy, the next one, there are these eco schemes, for instance, which support all kinds of environmental friendly practices. And also in the second pillar of the CAP, we will have associated investment support. But all of this is still under negotiation for the moment. Yes.
Okay. So watch this space sounds like the answer on that one. And another question, maybe you could take this one, Maria. This comes from SR Dane. They say, with the increase in consumption of plant-based food, how do you propose balancing out the allocation of extra crop requirements and balancing that with protecting and meeting sustainability targets?
That's a very good question. Of course, you are seeing within the industry how they're balancing this process. Many of the alternative protein companies, startups, for instance, in Spain, we have 400 startups, and many of them are actually working in alternative protein. Many of them are just switching slowly from one kind of the way of feeding an animal to the next kind of feeding animal, to just developing alternative protein in many cases. So, for instance, some of the most innovative alternative protein that we have in Spain precisely come from the meat industry. And this is really evolving, or we are having a clear impact on the way animals are being fed. And I think it's something very positive, exactly the same as the case as what I was mentioning before with milk. We have the first milk incubator that is actually being produced or has been launched by one of the biggest milk companies that we have in Spain. So this is very interesting indeed, yes.
Yeah, so much exciting innovation, and I think from a journalist's point of view, it's moving incredibly fast. We cover veganism quite a lot on Green, and that's purely based on our readers' demand. As you may know, this is EU Green Week this week, and the theme we're focusing on is protect our oceans, and we've been looking at we've done some articles as a result of the Netflix documentary Seaspiracy, which some of you might have seen, and we're finding that one documentary like that goes viral, goes big, is being spoken about, and it's really making people reconsider how they eat, what they eat, how much of fish or meat or plant-based foods they eat. So I think it's another of those things where there's a lot of information out there for consumers, and there's a lot of different considerations. That people want to be sustainable, but people might also have health issues which they need to manage, which of course is going to affect what they can and can't eat. So let's move on to consumers. We're all consumers alongside our day jobs. And I'd love to hear from each of you what role consumers play in your plans and in your work. Wellington, could you go first on this one?
I'm sorry, it is me?
Yes, please.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Just the role of consumers in your work.
Well, our biggest consumer, of course, it is in China, but we have a great market also in Europe. And not only in Europe, there's a way for the sustainable production, but now a wave of sustainable production is also coming from China. So it is a challenge, of course, for the Brazilian and South American production to roll this way to the sustainable production, and that we are trying to do here in Brazil and Mato Grosso. We have all those programs that guide the growers to comply to the labor, environmental, and social legislation, and I think that's the way, because we need to, like I said before, adapt our production to the customer's wish, and this wish is coming from EU, this wish is coming from China, and this wish is coming from everywhere in the world. So it's our role here in Mato Grosso and in Brazil to give this kind of sustainable food to the customers in China or Europe or wherever in the world.
Thank you. Henri, as you said earlier, consumer demand is one of the pillars of the Organic Action Plan. What are the barriers that stop more people not buying organic products?
Yeah, so indeed, as I said before, this action plan takes this approach that we first have to increase demand and then supply will hopefully follow. But of course, also for that, we have support. And what we think is necessary is we have a whole series of actions in this first axis on demand. So we start with information and communication measures. So what about telling consumers what the benefits are of organic farming, of organic production, explaining it to them? We have information communication measures under the Common Agricultural Policy that we can use for that, but also dedicated events. What about collecting more information, more evidence on the economic, environmental, social benefits of organic farming? Because let me correct maybe a perception. Of course, we are fully aware that organic farming, the benefits are not limited to environment and climate. There are also social and economic benefits. So the first thing is really information and communication measures informing consumers. Then more proactive, we're moving into the field of agricultural promotion. So this is really about promoting the consumption of organic products in the EU, but also in promising growth markets so that EU farmers, again, have an incentive to convert to organic production. And then we see a number of powerful tools in the public sector. So as I have said, this action plan takes a comprehensive approach. It addresses the private sector, but also the public sector. And one of the tools that the public sector has at its disposal is public procurement. So we focus a lot in the action plan on the promotion of green public procurement, explaining the criteria, explaining the modalities, inviting member states to put targets for organics in green public procurement, for instance. Then we also have a measure which is called the school scheme. So we finance the distribution of milk and milk products and fruits and vegetables in schools. And also there we are looking at increasing the share of organic product. But all of this is also associated with an educational program. So education, information, communication, promotion, then public procurement, as I said, that is an important package. And then there is, of course, the role of the private sector. If we have many farmers converting to organic production, but down the line, we don't have the food processors, we don't have the wholesalers and the retailers who also take up organic products, then there's not much use to it. So we really focus a lot on involving this whole supply chain from the farmer over the food processor, wholesaler, retailers, all the way down to the restaurants, and to see what kind of concrete commitments can we obtain from them in terms of enhancing the accessibility of organic products and the affordability of organic products. So that's a bit how we are aiming to tackle the issues that relate to the lack of consumer demand. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Lots of really interesting points to consider there. I really love the idea of if children are brought up eating sustainable or organic foods, then they'll see it as a very normal part of life. They'll see it as the type of food that you should eat. I think in the UK, there's still an image problem with organic food, and it's still seen as being something that you only eat if you are of a certain socioeconomic bracket, for instance, rather than it being seen as accessible for everyone, however much spending power they have. Maria, what do you think the role of consumers is, and what you do?
Well, I think I've already told you, Ruth. I think consumers have are a little bit bipolar. They know they have to eat healthy, and they know they have to really be committed to sustainability. But when the moment they decide to buy, they very much are making emotional decisions. So when you go to a supermarket, you make emotional decisions. You have to feed your children, you have to feed your husband, so the real change has to be in the side of producers rather than in the side of consumers. If you produce delicious, sustainable products, those products are going to be consumed and are going to be demanded in the supermarket or in the marketplace or in the internet or whatsoever. So really, when you really analyze the way consumers buy, even though they need and they, well, of course, it's fantastic to give them, to provide them with information and to make to have all this information in the products they're going to buy. But how many persons that go to a supermarket really read the very small labels that are in there? Very few of them. Perhaps when they're home and they really realize how many nutrients the product has, is going to realize that this product is perhaps not so sustainable. What is really important, for instance, is that importers or distributors or retail chains start to take the seals of sustainability as a way of deciding whether they have products in their supermarkets that are really sustainable or not. Because those products that are in the supermarket are those that the clients, the consumers, are going to buy. So this commitment in this part of the distribution chain is really important from my point of view. Of course, the way of giving information is going to change dramatically in the next years. Traceability, for instance, with blockchain, is going to give so much information to people who really want to know what the product is. So it is really not a seal of organic. It's this: if you have blockchain in the whole production chain, you are going to provide with very useful information to consumers. So my point is that we have to convince the distribution chain that it has to be committed with sustainability, and the way they introduce products in the supermarkets are really sustainable, because consumers have very little power of decision if they don't have these, if they don't find these products in the supermarkets. Perhaps I'm very radical, but that's the way I see it. We have to be very practical when tackling the issue of sustainability. Spain is very much committed to sustainability, but we have to be practical when tackling this issue. Thank you.
Yes, I love that idea of practicality. I think we should always work with reality rather than potential. And work with what is rather than how we wish things were. And so much of the reporting that we do, so much of the work I've done for years on climate is really about psychology. It's really about people changing their mindset and changing their perspectives and taking a longer term view of how the decisions they make today when shopping in a supermarket is a great example will have an impact 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And I think if we could all commit to thinking of the next generation rather than our own, we would all be on a really much path to a brighter future, for sure. Wellington, tell me from the point of view of a Brazilian consumer who wants to shop sustainably, how does that go for them? How easy is it for a Brazilian consumer to do that?
Well, here in Brazil, of course, like Maria said, most of our decision in the supermarket or even in the shopping mall is emotional. But here in Brazil, we are still a country in development. So many people here also take the decision based on price, on the thing's price. So, of course, all of people want a quality in the products, but of course, they're gonna assess the price because here we have still have a part of the people of the population in a poor situation. So price is a challenge. So we need to produce cheap food here in Brazil because all those people need to get those products, but in a cheaper way. And so that's because organic here is a challenge because to produce organic, you have an expensive cost of production. So and the product in the supermarket are expensive. Organic is expensive here in the supermarket. Most of people don't have access to those kind of product because the revenue. And so this is a challenge here. We need, first of all, to produce cheap food. And of course, most of the decision of the people here in Brazil is based on the price. Not so much the quality of the product, but in the price. It's most of the decision is based on the price of the products.
Thank you. Yeah, that's I mean, I guess also for EU consumers, that's a top of the list as well in what they decide to buy when they shop or even in a restaurant. For those of you watching at home, if you've got any questions that are coming up for you as you're listening to our speakers, we'd love your questions. I've probably got time for 2 or 3 more questions before we have to close. So please do send them in. Don't be shy. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So tell me, Henri, what perspective does the Commission take on that in terms of making sustainable or organic foods accessible to all consumers, no matter how much money they have to spend?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see a little bit what is the outcome of the COVID epidemic, and there we see something very interesting. What are the main trends in terms of consumer demand for the future? So I've just gone through a report which was produced by a consultancy together with a federation of retailers and wholesalers. Now, they say 3 things. They say, first of all, and that we all know, there is a tremendous increase in online sales. I think we have all experienced that. Maybe we have even participated in that. But then the second thing is, and that's very important, that consumers indicate that they will be buying more consciously. They will be buying healthy products. They will be buying locally produced, regionally produced products, and so on. But then third, and this is how this relates to your question, they want value for money. So price is indeed king. Now, in the action plan, we have tried to pay attention to that because, of course, the challenge is it would be good if, for the sake of the accessibility, the affordability of organic products, that prices would lower. But how do we ensure at the same time that the farmers still retain a fair income? And so that's why in this organic production action plan, we have also included measures, for instance, on strengthening the position of the farmer in the value chain. For instance, exploring the use of dedicated producer organizations. Also, we focus on short supply chains. So if farmers can sell directly to consumers, they can do so maybe at lower prices, but still retain a higher share of the value added. And also, generally, we are focusing on increasing the income of the farmer by investing in research and innovation, as I said, on seeds, on plant protection products, on increasing yields. So if the farmer has higher production, even if prices would lower, he would still retain a higher income. So these are some of the balances that we have to keep in mind. It's important to ensure the accessibility, affordability of organic products. At the same time, how do we secure a fair income for the farmers also for the future? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maria, where do you stand? I'd love to hear we've discussed quite a lot of challenges in this whole sector, but what are your success stories? What are you really proud of, maybe amongst the producers that you work with?
Yes, thank you, Ruth. Yes, I have. I see. Well, the agri-food sector in Spain is very strong, and I see so many cases I am very proud of. For instance, the case of the citrus, lemon, and grapefruit producers in Spain. Over 70% of lemon and grapefruit production in Spain is being sold to big multinationals all over the world, precisely in the US. And well, those multinationals were used to have standards, US standards, and they wanted to have the US sustainability standards. So the Spanish lemon and grapefruit producers committed, and they prove to those two big multinationals, US multinationals, that their commitment with sustainability in terms of economic sustainability and also production sustainability was really great. And now those two big companies are buying all their products from Spanish producers. So this is one of the cases I'm very proud of. The other case is the case of olive trees. In Spain is one of the biggest forests in olive trees all around the world. We are the first producer of olive oil and olives also, and also the first exporter. And the way they have adapted to climate change is really amazing. It's really making this whole ecosystem really worth as a way of living, and having also people being economically sustainable in the long term. So those are two cases I'm very proud of. And the third one will be, Ruth, related with innovation. No, those 400 startups in the agri-food sector that we have in Spain, and they are leading innovation, and they are reaching, for instance, Singapore, or they are reaching the US, or they're reaching Israel with really top innovations as regards, precisely the food industry, to make it more sustainable. As Henri was saying, it is very important to make this industry really sustainable in the long term, and only with this kind of innovations we are going to be able to do it.
Thank you so much. I really want to try some Spanish olive oil now. I'll have to get hold of some. Wellington, what are your success stories? What are you proud of? What's going well for you?
Well, Brazil is not only soybean or corn or cotton or livestock producer, but here we also have, especially Mato Grosso, popcorn and sunflower and sesame We are now producing sesame here to export to India. Mato Grosso is the #1 producer in popcorn, and the #1 producer in soy and in sunflower. And most of this sunflower and this popcorn is now being cultivated in after the soybean crop or after the corn crop. So the growers are the same. Soybean and corn growers are the same growers that is now producing sunflower and popcorn and even sesame. And so that's very curious, because here Mato Grosso has now this opportunity, because the climate, of course, because the land, because the soil, we are now having the opportunity to produce all those crops. Not only soybean, not only corn, not only cotton or even livestock, but those other crops like sesame, sunflower, and popcorn. And that's very curious and interesting here in Mato Grosso.
Great, it's great to hear about that diversity and what you're able to grow. And Henri, what, from the Commission's point of view, what success stories can you tell us?
Yeah, I think with this action plan, we really see a lot of things moving, and a lot of very worthwhile, very fruitful initiatives that are being taken in the public sector, but also in the private sector. So let me give a few examples, and maybe first about the public sector, and just to show the power of green public procurement. There is this example of the city of Copenhagen. Now, the city of Copenhagen runs around 900 kitchens of itself. So these are kitchens for nurseries, for daycare centers, for schools, for elderly homes, for the public services. And they have decided to increase the share of organic in those kitchens to 90%. So a very ambitious target there. What have they done? First of all, they have trained their kitchen staff to cook from scratch. So they didn't have to buy any more semi-processed goods, processed goods. They could spend more on organic products. Then they have also focused on eliminating food waste. They have bought in-season products, which is, of course, cheaper, and they have also reduced meat consumption. So a whole series of practices in the kitchen, so to say. But then to procure these organic products, they have used green public procurement. And when they set this objective, there was no supply system in place, basically able to cater for such a sudden demand for organic products. But very quickly, the private sector took note of this and organized itself in a way to accommodate this public procurement request. And now we have a fully developed supply chain there. So this shows the power that public authorities have, and also the power of tools like green public procurement. Now, when we look at the private sector, we also see many very promising developments. For instance, we see retailers, wholesalers supporting sustainable farming, supporting local processing. They will, for instance, co-invest with farmers. They will offer farmers longer-term contracts, which are so important for farmers that want to convert from conventional to organic farming. So we see a lot on the retail, on the wholesale side, but also we see major multinationals, major consumer good companies jumping on this sustainable food, organic food train. We see, for instance, a major multinational adopting the principles of regenerative agriculture, which is almost the same as organic farming. So you really see both in the public sector and the private sector very promising developments. And we, from our side, of course, want to stimulate them in any manner we can. Thank you.
Thank you. We've just had an amusing question in, which I'd love to put to you all. This comes from Fab Drud. And Fab seems to be a fan of a pretty alternative protein, which is insects. So he or she is asking, I'm afraid I'm not sure the gender, when will the EU start massive production of proteins with worms or other insects? He says that's very sustainable. Maria, any insect-based products coming out of Spain yet?
Oh yes, sure. Yes, there are quite a bunch of producers of insect-based protein in Spain. This is not the star of our pantry, of course, but it is good to think in the long term and to have a combination and to include it in the diet of future generations. I'm not ready for it myself, but of course. I'm very much willing to promote also the insect-based producers in Spain as another product of our pantry. Yes.
Thank you. Henri, you mentioned animal welfare earlier, so will you be protecting the welfare of worms and insects?
Well, we have in the action plan a general action on improving even further animal welfare. But at the same time, I can say that one of the bottlenecks in organic farming is animal feed. And there we are looking at alternative sources of protein. And the action plan mentions precisely insect-based feed and also feed based on algae, for instance. So we will have still this year an algae initiative also, which will be able to cater for this bottleneck in organic livestock farming. Yes.
Amazing. We did a story recently that the future is seaweed. We're seeing a lot of innovation coming out around algae, around seaweed. And I think that's about perspective change, right? Of looking at the things that are around us that are part of nature. How can they help us to make sure we do have enough food supplies and at the same time be eating more healthily? So we're going to be finishing in just a minute. So I'd like to put a final question to all of you. Despite having worked in climate for a few years now, I'm a stubborn optimist, and that's not my phrase. Of course, you might know it's Christiana Figueres' phrase originally. I'd love to hear, how are you feeling about the future of food and drink? Are you optimistic? Maria, why don't you take that one first?
Yes, thank you very much, Ruth. I'm a stubborn optimist myself, and all the years I've been working for the Spanish food industry, I only see innovation, willingness to do things better, commitment with excellence and diversity, and they need. We all need to think of a better future for the future generations. So I am very, very positive. We are going to have this innovation and this commitment with excellence and this willingness to think about the future will have a result and will have an impact for sure. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Wellington, how optimistic are you feeling?
Growers here are always optimistic. It's all they know to do. It's to produce food and of course and those kind of things. And we are optimists of the consumers increasing and the production increasing, of course. We have a good climate here in Brazil, so that's a good point for us. And of course, China is increasing their soybean consuming, and even Europe and even all the people. So we are always optimistic about soybean production here, not only in Brazil, but I think in the whole world, because most of the protein based comes from the soybean. Still come from the soybean, and of course, protein based on insect it could be an alternative, but in a small scale, I think so. I think the big scale of the protein will continue to be on soybean and those kind of source. So that's because we are always optimistic here in Brazil. Our growers are always optimistic.
Thank you. And Henri, how are you feeling about the future?
I must say I agree with the other panelists that I'm also very optimistic. I mean, this when I speak from the perspective of this action plan, it was adopted just in March, 25th of March of this year. And when we see the reaction to this action plan, it's extremely positive. It has been presented to the European Parliament, a very positive reception. It has been presented to the member states, very positive reception. We see the interest from the private sector. They all want to see what the implications are for them. They all want to see how they can contribute. And of course, we see this very rapid increase in consumer demand for organic products. We are talking 10, 15% a year growth in the organic market. So I think that for organic production and by extension for sustainable food production, we can be very optimistic for the future.
Thank you so much. Lots of reasons for optimism there. So that brings us to the end of our debate today. It just leaves me to say thank you so much to our panelists. It's been a really enjoyable, really stimulating debate. I've really enjoyed learning from all of you. And thank you for all the work you do in this really important future that we're all trying to create a greener future for all of us. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next Euronews debate.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you to Euronews, and thank you to everybody. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.